What's going on, everybody? We are back. It is the Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 80 on this Friday, May 3rd, 2024. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy with you on a very busy week in the transfer portal for Oklahoma, both football and basketball. Of course, the saga is over. The Sooners got Dominic Williams last night. We're going to, of course, break that down, react to all of it as the Sooners got their big fish in the transfer portal. We'll also look at the portal as a whole. Is Oklahoma done? Is there more positions to be added? We'll break that down a little bit. And then the roller coaster week that has been for Porter Moser and that OU basketball program. Some good moments, some not so good moments. We'll kind of try and absorb it all on the back end of the show. But CK, obviously, we have to start with the bombshell news of the week for OU football. That was getting Dominic Williams last night. The TCU transfer defensive tackle announced his allegiance to Oklahoma with a great photo of Brent Venables in the jersey in his office. I'm sure you saw that. This was a guy the last couple of weeks we've been talking about it. As soon as he went in the portal, that was an immediate Oklahoma's going to be interested. We talked about what it was going to take to get him and the interest that Williams was going to garner. That all happened, but somehow Oklahoma found a way to close the deal. Just start there, CK. How'd they do it? How did Oklahoma, in your estimation, what you gathered, get this done and go get their big fish in the portal here with Dominic Williams?
Yeah, one of the most dramatic yet drama-less portal recruitments I think I have ever seen. It kind of feels like that roller coaster that you ride where all you're doing is going up and down, and yet you're still like, I got a little bit of motion sickness. Maybe get me off this ride. Now that we're off, though, kind of crazy how this one sort of played out. I think within minutes of him hopping in the transfer portal, kind of like you mentioned, he gets that Oklahoma visit scheduled. It was the only multi-day trip on the slate for him.
Yeah.
And the visit went, by all accounts, incredibly well. And the meetings with the coaching staff were incredibly productive. I think he really connected with Brent Venables as a human being. He mentioned in that commitment post, Josh, that he sees himself, does Dominic, as kind of a blue-collar, hard-nosed worker, and he related to Brent Venables and his upbringing and what Brent Venables believes in. Then, of course, Todd Bates. Outstanding job by Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis to reshape this defensive line through additions like Dominic Williams. And we'll get to that more in a second, but Bates sells the development at defensive tackle in this system incredibly well to a guy with all the natural tools, and I'll talk about that as well.
Yeah.
But then he goes on these visits. He rightfully explores the process, and I do want to mention something because some people got after me, but I ended up being right about something. So let me bring it up to start. He goes on a Texas visit. We find out that Texas is flying in his younger brother. Why that's significant? Dominic Williams only ended up at TCU because his younger brother said, Dominic, you should go to TCU.
Right.
Talks about it extensively in this whole tell-all article. Shared that note with some subscribers. And, of course, a bunch of people are talking about, oh, that's worthless, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward, he goes through the LSU visit. All of a sudden, he has meetings with other programs into the mid-morning of decision day, including one with Oklahoma. And then after the big reveal several hours later, he mentions, Oklahoma fans, be sure to thank my little brother. So not going to toot my own horn here, but there's reasons why I like to report the layers to a recruitment, folks. I know that some people want to dismiss it, but these portal processes are so tricky. And whenever you have something that significant that stands out, you have to tailor to it. And to add to why this was a right aspect of the recruitment to track, guess who became the first ever offer for Dominic Williams' younger brother while they were visiting a different program? Oklahoma. Because that special moment created by OU with Dominic's younger brother, with Dominic himself, and his mother. I think this family really bought into the relationships that were being built at OU. So to answer your question, long story short, Josh, I think that Oklahoma continued to, and I talked about this on the recruiting show at 24/7 Sports, this is one of the most relational coaching staffs in college football right now. They're transparent, open, honest. They understand in a world where this sport is more transactional than ever before, that if you tailor yourself towards the relational side of things, you're going to connect with these guys. Because as long as you're checking boxes with the other stuff that today's era of college football presents, if you can just add greater context through a personal tie to someone, they're going to want to play for you. And I think that's what Oklahoma did here. We knew they were going to go into this portal recruitment, Josh, being aggressive on the NIL front.
Mhm.
Everyone had to be who wanted to be a player.
Yeah.
That, to me, is a non-story here. To me, I think Oklahoma ended up winning out not only because of what OU now is today, it is a program under Brent Venables and Todd Bates that defensive players want to play at, which is something we could podcast about for an hour and a half. It's a place that people want to play because they know they're going to be treated like people more than just players. And I think all of this and several other layers to this portal recruitment led Dominic Williams to Norman, Oklahoma.
It's a huge win, obviously. But on the field, we'll get into in a second, but just optically for Oklahoma, because how many times has OU been on the wrong end of these, especially these big defensive lineman pursuits whenever, A&M gets involved, and obviously Texas was involved here, LSU was involved here, and just kind of an announcement, I think, to kind of both OU's fan bases as well as nationally, like OU means business here. This was a huge win optically. There's been a bit of it's largely a joke. It's a meme, but that, OU is broke. People like to joke about that. To kind of carve up and make this happen is a huge statement about the investment right now in the program and where OU's at and what kind of business they mean going into the SEC. So just from that alone, what a huge win it is. Just like the PR of it to the fans and to just everyone and to future guys that you're going to try and add down the road, like all of it. It's a really big deal. And then the on the field is obvious as well. I mean, the guy's really good, and he comes right in. You lose Jacob Lacey. You had an opening at defensive tackle. This is probably, and you can give and take here, but best defensive tackle on the team. I mean, him and Deshaun Terry are going to probably be your two guys whenever week one rolls around. So you needed him, the player, but then you kind of loop into all of it. It's as big of a recruiting win as OU's had, in the last couple of years since Brent Venables has been here, in my estimation. What is Oklahoma getting? The player, and talk about that aspect of it in terms of sliding right in. They needed this guy, and here we go, as he's going to make a big difference right away in 2024 for Oklahoma.
Yeah, 6'2", 310, kind of got that refrigerator build. He's not wide as much as he is kind of stocky and put together. I watched some film earlier this morning preparing for the show and finally being able to settle in now that the announcement actually came through.
Took a while yesterday. He made us wait.
Definitely made us wait, but you turn on the tape and you see why, right? I mean, this guy, I love the way that he plays. Violent hands, quick get off. I like his ability to shock lock shed. So get a hold of the offensive lineman, bench press him off me, read which running lane I need to get to, and then get rid of that guy. He also can do more than the shock lock shed, though. I think he's got really fast hands. Through that, he sheds blocks very quickly. And I found it interesting, Josh. He played under Joe Gillespie when Gillespie was at TCU running the 3-3-5 hybrid defensive model that they ran. When the Horned Frogs went to the college football playoff and inevitably made the national championship game,
right.
He had some snaps at nose, zero tech. And I don't think that's necessarily 100% what this guy's game is. And so, look, folks know if you're running a 3-down front, those defensive linemen sometimes basically just have to take on blocks. And outside of two-gapping, there's not always a ton of opportunity to become a attacking downhill type of player. But when you watch Dominic Williams do that, you see the motor. And for what it's worth, depending on who you are out there, whether or not you buy into PFF statistics and grades, ran some numbers on PFF, and this guy grades out higher than the talented defensive tackle he will be replacing in Jacob Lacey in almost every category: pass rush, run stopping, things of that nature. Deshaun Terry grades out better than him as a run stopper in PFF, but keep in mind, we're talking about Deshaun Terry's borderline an 80 grade run defender on PFF.com. I think Dominic Williams in the 70s. So this guy clearly knows how to play the run. I think there's a lot of pass rush game to him, though. And I think if you're running a 4-down front and you have some of these guys that Oklahoma will have along the defensive line. I mean, DeJoun Terry, these edge rushers in PJ Adebawore and Caden Woolard from the transfer portal, and then R. Mason Thomas, who I think the world of, and Ethan Downs, who's a proven commodity. And then there's defensive tackles behind that top two to keep them fresh, and Jermaine Lole from the portal, who visited with Dominic Williams, and then Stone and Jackson and Grayson Hall. To the other part of this, he's clearly a darn good football player. But considering the context of the quality of the football player and the get, I mean, this is, like you mentioned, it's kind of a complete PR changer for the program right now. I mean, I'm sure you saw it. I saw some fan bases out there that were talking about how impressed they were that Oklahoma was able to swing this thing. And look, to me, as someone who tries to maintain objectivity, I do truly buy into that concept. Things are markedly different in Norman, Oklahoma. And you and I have covered this program for years. You mentioned it. I don't know how many times I've had to talk about Oklahoma losing out on an elite defensive line prospect at the last second. But even then, it's like their ability to recruit at an elite level defensively in general, the portal or recruiting, simply was not there. And statistically, this Brent Venables staff is recruiting at a higher clip than Lincoln Riley was able to when he was in Norman. And it's because of lands like this. It's just this Dominic Williams commitment to me was kind of the public service announcement to the rest of college football. Like exactly what you mentioned. Oklahoma's not going to be a pushover in the SEC if this trend continues. And I think with what happened, not just with Dominic Williams, but some of these other portal gets and the way that this defensive unit looks in general, I just don't see that slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, and obviously this continues a trend too. And you go, obviously you go get yourself a David Stone, you win that battle. You get Peyton Bowen, you win that battle with all that craziness on signing day. I mean, this is, becoming a theme in the last couple of years of, whereas for a while it was just kind of, OU fans were so skeptical, anytime with these high-profile defensive guys, like, we're going to hear good things, it's going to feel okay, and then, a couple of days leading up to it, it's not going to happen, and then he's going to end up going to A&M, or recently like a Missouri or whatever. And so to make this happen and to continue the momentum and to go get this big get, which was immediately a priority in the portal that we all identified right away, to identify it, that's our guy, get a visit scheduled, and then get it done. The family fell in love with OU, it sounds like, and there you go. And Dominic fell in love with the relationship with Venables and Bates, and they got it done, which they needed to do. They went and they got it done, which is kind of
you commend the staff. You commend Dominic and everything that comes with this process. But the one final thing that I want to mention that I don't see getting talked about a ton, kind of the other aspect of this, you got to commend the work that I'm sure the Oklahoma fan base with the NIL collective at OU did here behind the scenes. I mean, Dominic Williams isn't going to a campus where things weren't ironed out from an NIL perspective. And I heard all the noise and the rumors about the numbers that were floated with Dominic Williams, but I think that's the other aspect of this. You commend Brent Venables, you commend this Oklahoma coaching staff, all of that good stuff that we just talked about. It's a public service announcement, but it's made also, and you have to talk about it. I mean, fans now control the destiny of their programs more than we've ever seen before. And so covering this thing, to me, I was like, well, how exactly is this going to be handled behind the scenes? Is there actually going to be the buy-in that you talked about? And is it going to pay off for a player that Oklahoma's fans, for example, had been clamoring for years and years and years? And so that's the last point I want to make real quick is like, you also have to tip your hat to the collective and the fans that made this land possible, because that's an aspect we truly have to cover now as beat reporters. The collective aided in the landing of Dominic Williams, and now, again, their program is going to be considered a much larger threat going into the SEC.
100%. 100%. What a day Thursday was. Just kind of waiting for this thing all day. And we didn't do the show Thursday, as we normally do. I mentioned on Monday that we're probably going to move the show back to Friday because I had high school baseball yesterday. And I would have guessed in a million years that I would have done. I did one game in the morning, and then I went and got lunch, and I came back, and had time to get ready. I did my second game. I came home. I ate dinner. I never would have guessed I would have been able to do all of that and was still scrolling Twitter, waiting for this. We expected much earlier in the day, but the wait was worth it for OU fans because they got it. The wait. If after all that went the other way, that would have been a painful day. But instead, it's a great day in hindsight, and they found a way to get it done.
For those asking, I did get the house cleaned, and you'll know what I'm talking about if you were on Twitter yesterday. I did get the house cleaned in time.
I made the joke about it yesterday. Few people can have OU Twitter and just the fans in general in a chokehold the way that Dominic Williams did yesterday. I mean, I don't feel like anybody did anything. I don't know if anybody got any work done. People in offices all over the state just not paying attention to what they're doing. Everybody was just consumed by it, and it went a good way.
How many brains are fried in a few years because they spent an atrocious amount of screen time watching and waiting for Dominic Williams to make his decision? I know for me, I was like, my head hurts. I've been sitting here waiting for so long. So props to you if you were part of the refresh gang out there, because Lord knows it was not easy work.
And shout out, obviously our 24/7 Sports Network. Colin's all over it. I know our LSU guys were all over it. It's been, it was a group effort on this one, and we got it done. And Dominic Williams comes in. You look at the defense as a whole now. There's just not a lot of holes on it. With what you brought back, you added, like you said, Jermaine Lole. So you had 2 defensive tackles added in who are going to factor in and be a big part of this defense right away. The edges are loaded. The linebacker room is as deep as it's been in Oklahoma in a super long time. We've talked about the secondary and the place it's in. Defensively, it feels really good at Oklahoma right now. So that kind of segues nicely into my next question, which is just the portal in general at this point. Is Oklahoma done? I mean, they added Branson Hickman from SMU. Obviously, they needed a guy who could play center really bad. They addressed it. There's Branson Hickman brings in. They added Lole. Now you got Dominic Williams. So you got 3 post-spring portal guys in. They've had some guys leave. We talked before about Josiah Wagner and obviously Shane Witter. And Justin Harrington. This week they had Gavin Freeman enter the portal. That was on Tuesday night. So he's off. So that's a scholarship opened up. General Booty at the portal this week. So they've had some guys leave, but no massive names really, other than maybe Harrington, who was your starting cheetah for a couple of weeks.
Sure.
What's your kind of expectation moving forward in the portal? Are you going to still be involved and aggressive? Or are you kind of thinking that they're probably the dust's going to settle here? What's your feeling the portal moving forward now into the summer?
Yeah, you never want to speak in absolutes when it comes to the transfer portal, right? Definitely. But I mean, the read that I personally get, I think the dust is going to settle here. I actually dropped a couple of notes on our board for our subscribers.
Yeah.
Before Dominic Williams popped, kind of sharing some other intel and names to know that I had been able to gather during the Great Wait. And kind of one of my primary takeaways was like, a lot of this is contingent upon what happens with Dominic Williams. So now that he's committed, I've mentioned on the show before, but offensive tackle, yes, it would have been ideal. But folks, you got to keep in mind supply and demand concepts.
Yeah, it's just not. Yeah, it's just not.
There are no offensive tackles in the portal right now. I mean, pardon my French, but there are no offensive tackles worth a damn in the portal right now. And most of them who are in the portal might be worth a look, have already picked out a destination. So I don't see much there. I mentioned in the notes package last night, it's like Gino Vandermark from Michigan State. Some folks might remember him.
Mm-hmm.
He's back in the portal. If you'll remember correctly, I mean, he was a tweet away from publicly announcing a commitment to Oklahoma this past window, ends up going back to Michigan State. Now he's back in the portal, did some digging there, and he's a guard. So in theory, I think the spot he may have occupied once upon a time ended up getting filled by someone like Garion Hatchett. And I obviously think Garion Hatchett's a really darn good football player, proven product at a high level. with his run at Washington. And so I kind of think they're done, Josh. I mean, I know that the scholarship spots are still pretty sticky, and you really didn't have a ton of positional needs either. So if we're sitting here and we're basically saying the only singular position spot on campus right now where you may have wanted to add a portal body is offensive tackle, and there's really none out there.
Yeah.
It kind of feels safe to say that Oklahoma's probably wrapped up out of the spring portal window.
Yeah, I mean, we went into it when the window opened and we talked about it. What were the needs? The obvious needs were defensive tackle and then offensive line help. Well, you added 2 D tackles, 2 good ones. Mm-hmm. And you added offensive line help, like we said, with Hickman, who can play center. And you didn't have centers on your team, basically, with Everett being out for an extended period of time. And, Josh Bates is a young guy. They had Josh Isosa doing it, in spring. They were really thin there. And they addressed that with Hickman. Like I said, would you like to add a tackle? Sure. But there's just not tackles to get. You can't just get people added that don't exist, So you're kind of where you're at on that. I do think this offensive line, it's going to still be a question mark. Obviously, they need to get healthy. I don't know who your tackles are going to be. I mean, obviously going into the spring, we all thought Jacob Sexton and Spencer Brown would be your tackles. Don't know if that's how it feels now. Spencer Brown didn't have a great camp, and Jacob Sexton we saw playing some guard throughout and in the back end into the spring game even. So I don't know. I mean, they need Jake Taylor probably to step up. They need a couple of these guys to step up. But they got to get healthy. You got to get Hatchet back. Got to get Everett back. But then you have some flexibility. So we'll see. It's going to be a major storyline in fall camp. Is that offensive line kind of figured it out? I feel like they're pretty good inside with Kavechi Nawe, who had a great camp. And then, like I said, they just added Hickman. I think they're feeling pretty good with those tackle spots. Obviously, everybody knows how important they are. And you're going to have to figure it out who are actually going to be your guys there. So we shall see. But they're in a pretty good spot. There's not a lot of holes in the team elsewhere. Obviously, they're extremely deep at wide receiver. We talk about the running back positions in a pretty good place. Quarterback room is obviously in a great place as well. And so there's just, you kind of look around the roster, there's just not a ton of needs, frankly, outside of, like you said, maybe adding a tackle, but that's not really likely or feasible. So we'll see.
I saw a fan on Twitter almost immediately after Dominic Williams announced his commitment to Oklahoma, a monumental moment in the portal, quote tweet and basically say like, all right, Bill Beatonbow, now go get an offensive tackle. And it's like, can you just,
let's relax.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's hilarious to follow these days, but they're in a good spot. Coming out of this window, man, you land literally a top 5 graded offensive lineman in the portal in Branson Hickman, 2 proven defensive tackles. I mean, what more could you ask for, especially when you're going to the SEC? So yeah, I think it's a really strong way to close it out, and I do kind of think they're closing it out. So
it's a scary place to be in, and I'm hesitant to say too much, obviously, but I feel like they're an offensive line from being reliable away from being a pretty good football team. So we'll
100%.
We'll see. We got a whole camp to figure out some stuff, and a whole summer here coming up and everything. But it's a good looking roster right now. It is. So we'll, like I said, we have more time to talk about that. We're a little less than 4 months from the opener, but it's going to be fun to watch it. And this is obviously a huge get. Yeah, bringing Williams in. So a good portal window, and we'll see if they do anything else. And sure, we'll be sure to dive into it on the show. And of course, for our VIP members, if there is a target that becomes available that looks like it's a possibility, but for now, it seems like the dust maybe has settled, but we'll obviously keep you updated. Become a VIP member, Sooners Illustrated, and keep listening and watching the show, obviously, all throughout the rest of the spring into the summer. As far as basketball, we'll shift over there to kind of wrap up. It's been a weird week. A lot has happened since Tom and James and I did the show on Monday. A lot has happened. So later that day, they added Bryson Goodine from Fairfield, who's another good shooter, kind of been the theme of this window, kind of getting good shooter, kind of 3-and-D type of guys. They've loaded up on that. It's been a lot of guards. They then didn't get Brandon Garrison, which was tough. He goes to Kentucky. But it's one of those things like, and I've been as critical of the OU basketball program as anybody, but when Kentucky says they want a guy, what are you supposed to do? How are you going to win that battle? Yeah. So Kentucky gets Brandon Garrison, so they didn't get him. They struck out on all their big in-state guys with Padula and Overton and Garrison. You then lose Caden Cooper, which kind of came out of nowhere. I texted you the morning of saying there's rumors that somebody's hitting the portal. And I didn't know who. We were kind of speculating who it might be. And then, boom, Caden Cooper, which was like the one name you didn't want it to be if you were an OU fan. So you lose Cooper. He was a top 100 recruit, didn't play at all in his 1 year, and now he's gone. So you just didn't – it's like you didn't even have him. So he is the portal. But then today they go back in and make another ad with Duke Miles from High Point, who is a highly thought of – you have to get past the schools sometimes. I know you put a High Point and you're like, what the heck is that? It was between OU and Auburn, which Auburn's obviously – they're humming. They're a good basketball program right now. They're the top of the SEC. And they went and beat Auburn head-to-head for Duke Miles. Where are you kind of at on this basketball program and team? It's been a roller coaster week. If we did the show 2 days ago, I think I would have sat here and been like, burn it all down. It is disaster mode. Feels like they've stabilized a little bit when you bring in Duke Miles, and there's another big fish they're after, which you can talk about a little bit if you want. There's a chance that they can maybe kind of salvage this thing, all right? Maybe. I don't know. Where are you kind of at?
So people aren't going to know this, but if you're listening at home or watching, this show has basically been like the show from hell. It's been turned into a pretty good thing. I think we're having a good show so far, and it's like,
yeah, it's been a challenge.
What we focus on is Josh and I have faced. I mean, I got a call 30 seconds before Duke Miles announces his commitment, saying, "Hey, this is happening," and then he commits. So then I have to write a story while we're trying to podcast, as I got a heads up, literally, folks, like 30 seconds before it happens. Then Callaway's Wi-Fi crashes and the whole 9 yards. Why I say that? I mean, you go through hell, and then all of a sudden you start going, you settle in a little bit, and it's like, hey, we're actually doing okay. And I feel like today's podcast is very much a summation of what Oklahoma basketball has been like.
Yeah, sure.
Because man, like, you lose Aaron Scott at the last minute to St. John's. RJ Godfrey visited and now is very strongly trending elsewhere. We mentioned Padula, Overton, but then Garrison didn't even visit Kentucky. They picked up the phone and got him. It just looks like things are not going great. And when Caden Cooper hopped in the portal that day, that for me was like, I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen here. And then all of a sudden, you land a player in Duke Miles who is clearly a heralded player. Like, the read I get from a lot of folks in the college basketball space, this guy is not only a veteran guard, but a proven talent, someone who can step in right away, start for you, average 30-plus minutes a game when he was a starter at High Point and filled up the stat sheet, earned a ton of all-conference Big South accolades. Like, the guy's clearly good at basketball, folks. And then you follow that up, a commitment from him today, and there was a crystal ball pick in for Duke Miles to Auburn. Keep that in mind. Like, one of our experts in the network thought he was landing with the Tigers. He's from the state of Alabama, I believe a product of Montgomery, Alabama. And so it literally going into today, people thought he was going to land in familiar territory. Oklahoma beats out Bruce Pearl for a really quality guard available for transfer. And they're not done yet. You mentioned it. The number one player in the transfer portal is going to be on campus by the time folks are listening or watching this. Kadari Richmond, number one player available in the transfer portal rankings, number one player overall in general, top point guard. Yeah. Seton Hall product, was a first-team All-Big East honoree. Guy's really darn good. And I'll put up some more notes on him for our subscribers, so feel free to join the site if you can. I believe our 50% off special is expired. Let me see if the mustaches forgot to. Okay, they removed it, but you can still get 30% off. And I'll talk a little bit more about what's going on here. But basically, the number one player in the portal is going to be in Norman, and people thought he was a done deal elsewhere. So clearly there's some allure that led Kadari Richmond to OU, at least for a visit. Now, you still got to go through the process, but I kind of think that's a very fitting way to put the cherry on top of what's been a wild ride for
It
OU.
has.
And listen, like, this program has been through a lot, but I commend this staff for not only going through it, but kind of keeping the head down and working on some things, landing someone like Miles away from a hometown program like Auburn when the Tigers really wanted him, and then following that right up, somehow getting the best player available in this portal cycle to at least visit. It's a testament to what they're trying to do right now. And, you know, you mention it, like Jalen Moore still could easily return to this program, and they only have a couple more spots left to fill. So you're seeing the finish line. It's in sight if you're Oklahoma basketball. And the way that this thing is going, they're actually kind of picking the feet up a little bit. It's pretty good to see for them right now.
Like you said, 2 open spots right now, not counting Jalen Moore. If Jalen Moore came back, they still have 2 open spots. So maybe that is counting Jalen Moore. I don't know. However you want to. They got 2 open spots, taking Jalen Moore completely out of the equation. If he goes to the NBA, they have 3 spots. Now, obviously, not to rain on the parade at all here. We talked about it before we start recording. There's an obvious theme here with all these guys. Dayton Forsythe, who signed, guard. Kobe Elvis, guard. Jaden Jones, guard. Bryson Goodine, guard. Duke Miles, guard. Kadari Richmond, guard. I love guard play. You have to have good guard play to win college basketball. The guards, they didn't have any guards, remember, after the season because McCollum and Uzan, they all left. So you needed, and they added a lot of them. You probably need a big at some point. Obviously, you have Sam Godwin back, who was your starting 5 last year, but he lost his backup in John Hughley. That would be my only real – and they still have open spots to play with, so I would imagine they will add a big. But that's really, if you want to be a Debbie Downer at all, that would be the one thing is, can we get maybe a big man in here? But they are kind of stabilizing pretty well, considering all things considered, with everything that's happened. I mean, losing Kane Cooper was – that just – it arguably cuts deep more than any other guy they lost in the portal, because they had this guy who was a top 100, and we all season was a storyline of like, why can't this guy get minutes? He's obviously a freak athlete. I remember distinctly talking to Milos Uzan during the season. I can't remember when, doesn't matter, about Jalen Moore and how he can just get up and throw it down as good as anyone we've seen at the LNC since like Blake Griffin, literally. And he said with no hesitation that Kane Cooper was a better dunker and a more freak athletic specimen than even Jalen Moore is. And I just thought, man, I wish we could see him play. And I was excited for this year for him to probably maybe start and be a big part of this team. And now he's gone. So that hurt, that cut deep a little bit, but they've kind of righted the ship decently. And we'll see if they can get Richmond, obviously. But it sounds like they will indeed be playing basketball this year, contrary to reports. So we'll see.
I don't know, man. That's a bold statement. Careful now. You're getting ahead of the skis a little bit, according to Twitter.
It's been quite a week. I mean, to just go from, they got Goodine. They didn't get Garrison. Oh my gosh, Cooper left, to, okay, now I got Miles in there. Got this really talented Richmond kid coming in. It's been as up and down of a week. I mean, Monday when they got Goodine feels like a month ago, and it was 4 days ago. So wild week, and we'll see where they go from here.
I'll say lastly, to round that note out, the window has closed, and
nobody else can leave.
No one else can leave. And the players in the portal are who you can go and get. So we kind of know the talent pool that they're working from this point on. And so if you're curious, feel free to surf. I know 24/7 Sports has an outstanding database for all transfer portal players, but I just wanted to say real quick, man, like, now the dust is settling a little bit and there is some traction, there is also a little bit of safety in that you're not expecting any other exits, and you also kind of know what you're working with from a target perspective too. So I'm interested to see how they navigate that as well.
No, it's a good point. They've lost their guys. Everyone else is around, and the only real big question, obviously, is Jalen Moore, which we're not going to know about for another few weeks or so. I can't remember when that cutoff is. It's sometime in May, I'm pretty sure. The expectation, the belief is that he will likely be back, but you never know. I don't know. I mean, he goes to the combine, and we all know he's an athletic specimen. He may blow people away, and then he ends up liking what he hears. He goes, and he gets drafted. I mean, that's possible. So we'll see. That's a huge question still hanging out there. what Jalen Moore will elect to do. But yeah, like I said, it feels a lot better than it did a week or so ago. And so they're trying to just figure it out. And they seem to have done an okay job in the portal here. And we'll see if they can continue to add. And they obviously will. Who they continue to add with, I guess, is really the question there.
It looks like the deadline to return following a quick Google search, I believe I'm using the vaunted Wikipedia, May 29th.
All right.
I
So
believe
still,
is the date. So
a few weeks still. So still almost a month for him to make that call. So we're still going to have that caveat with every basketball conversation of we don't know unless he makes a decision before then. So we shall see. I think that's it. Like Collin said, this was a show that just didn't want to get going. We were just about to start, and we got the news on Miles, and then I had an internet crash. I'm about to move soon, and I'll be switching providers. And so I hopefully will avoid those sorts of things in the future. But we got it done. We got the show in. It's been a busy week for both of us. And so we press on one day at a time. That's the theme around here at these here parts, one day at a time. And that's where we're at. So
we're just trying to make it, folks. But if you would like to join us for the ride, feel free to subscribe to SoonersIllustrated.com. 30% off your annual VIP pass. And listen, I'll say this as we get out of here. Pretty fun time, all things considered. Yeah, it's a lot, but what a week, basically, it's been in the world of Oklahoma athletics.
What a week. What a week, then what a just like a 24 hours. It's been nuts. So I think that's it for now. Tom's on vacation, so it'll be James and I on Monday. We'll recap anything else that happens in the portal or whatever else that needs to be discussed between now and then. We'll also recap big weekends for the Diamond Sports. Bedlam softball this weekend. James will be covering that in Northern. That's a huge series. We'll, of course, recap that and break that down. Big series for baseball as well. They're in Lubbock this weekend playing Texas Tech. So we'll talk about that on the Monday program. Collin and I will rendezvous next. Should be back on Thursday to kind of hit anything else recruiting-wise and stuff like that. You guys know the drill by now. Like Collin said, become a VIP subscriber to Sooners Illustrated and get all the latest portal intel, recruiting intel, team intel for all the various sports. We're all over it. It's we just passed the 1 year mark on Wednesday. Talk about that a little bit on the Monday show. Crazy, we're already a year into this thing. The show is not quite a year old because we didn't start it until like July. But the site is just past the 1 year mark. So appreciate everybody in the support in year one. Year two is going to be bigger and better. And keep this thing rolling. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well and the podcast, wherever you get it. And we'll catch you guys next time. So that's it for now. For Collin Kennedy, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll see you guys next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.